Hey, Sales Hacker community. Thanks everybody for joining us for another awesome webinar. Today we're talking about how to get your reps to own their metrics, and we're going to get really in deep with some good tips. Our guest today is Greg Keshian. He's the COO at Reckoner and founder at Reckoner. And he's just got like oodles of experience to share here from his experience at, what's the Zero company, Greg? What's that called?
At Zero Turnaround.
Thank you. Zero turnaround, 10x in 4 years, 10x growth in 4 years, but also all the companies he works with at Reckoner. So seeing them grow and managing performance and getting their reps to own their own contribution to that. So we're going to get really in deep. A couple things before we do though. So number one, use the Q&A feature at the bottom today. If you have questions, we'll try to get them in throughout. We'll also leave some space at the end if you have questions that we haven't answered. Please drop them in there. That's what we're all looking at. And we're going to give people just a minute here to continue to join. So while we're doing that, get into that Q&A feature, open it up so you have it ready, and introduce yourself. Tell us your name, tell us where you are, tell us your company, your role. We want to know who's with us today. So we have Mishu Ali Suhas. Hi, Mishu. Thanks for joining us. And for those of you, by the way, who don't know me, I'm Colin Campbell. I'm the Director of Marketing at Sales Hacker. Been here for a few months, so nice to meet y'all. Make sure you introduce yourselves in the Q&A feature. Matt Wallace at UserZoom. He's the Director of Inside Sales for North America. Hi, Matt. Thanks for coming. Let us know if you have questions. Get them typed in there. If you know you have something you're going to want to ask, get in there now because that sometimes gets a little crowded. We've also got Hannah Schuler, the SDR Manager. Wow, we're going fast now. West APAC at GitLab in Denver. Antonio Pastor, the VP of Sales and Enablement at Arapac. Kathy from Luma Health. This is a good gang. Hey, everybody. So we're going to get into it. Brian, Director of Sales at Gym Sales. It's the last one. Shout out to Brian. Thanks, man. We're going to get into it. I want to make sure I give Greg time to share all of his wealth of knowledge with you on getting reps to actually own their metrics. So I'm going to let him take it away. I've got a little bit of experience with this myself, so it's something that I personally have struggled with, especially in moving from my first management role to my second management role. I didn't do a good job delegating this, and it lost all steam and became overwhelming. Greg already, before we got on, shared some awesome stuff with me, and he's going to share it with you too. So Greg, I'll let you take it away.
Cool. Thanks, Colin. Good to be here, and I'm excited to do this webinar with you guys. So basically the agenda for today is we're going to talk obviously about how to get reps to do a better job of owning their metrics. But before we even get into that, we'll kind of cover why is any of this stuff important in the first place? Why are people tuned in and wanting to learn about any of this? We'll talk about scaling your sales organization and kind of what that looks like as you achieve different levels of growth over time. And then we'll get into it. So we'll talk through 4 different processes that you can put in place for 2019 that will actually help you get your sales managers and your sales reps to kind of have better understanding, command, and ownership of their metrics. I'm sure that a lot of people that are on here have just kind of wrapped up putting 2019 plans into place. And I'm sure that a lot of those plans include either adding in another layer of managers or adding a whole bunch of headcount. And so a lot of this stuff is going to be critical that we go through here. And then we're going to wrap up with some conclusions and just some sort of tips as to if you take any of these 4 processes and you put them into place, what's the best way to actually do that and make sure that that goes successfully and you kind of get the most out of it. All right.
I'm so excited for this. One other thing, we just got a question that I want to make sure everybody knows. We will send out a recording of this afterwards. So if you have a hard stop halfway through or you just have to go, don't worry. You'll get this plus the deck and maybe some extra fun stuff from Greg, who knows, after. So if you're registered, you're getting it. Don't worry.
Cool. All right. So I'm just going to dive into my background a little bit in terms of where does my perspective on any of this come from. So I'm the Chief Operating Officer and co-founder here at Reckoner. And what we do is we help sales organizations achieve better results by understanding their metrics better, getting them in front of their sales teams, and putting processes into place to really take action based off of those KPIs and metrics. So we work with dozens of best in breed companies to automate their KPIs, help define their KPIs, and get the most out of them. My career has really been kind of around strategy and operations for growing businesses. So understanding what's the model that we're striving to achieve, what does that really look like, and then how do we define the benchmarks that we actually want to hit in order to get there, and then working with the teams to deliver on that. So I've worked with a bunch of different sales teams, marketing teams, customer success and support teams in order to move the ball forward and achieve higher levels of growth. And here at Reckoner, I'm involved with many of our customers on both the kind of the go-to-market sales and marketing side, as well as customer solutions. And so what that means is that I get the good opportunity to see what lots of best in breed companies are doing and how we can make that even more effective, by automating measurements or by putting process into place that really helps them take advantage of the KPIs that they're tracking.
That's my favorite thing about this topic today, Greg, by the way, because what you're sharing, first of all, you could probably run this without any of the input from those best in breed companies, just because you have your track record to pull from. But I love that what you're sharing isn't just some like homegrown, like, oh, I did this once and it worked for me and maybe it'll work for you thing. This is like you've compiled kind of best practices that you've seen from everybody else, right?
Yep. Yeah. From lots of different types of companies too. So companies that sell big enterprise solutions to companies that sell like low ASP transactional products. And so as I go through, I'll try to call those out as well in terms of, if you're a company like this, then you probably want to do it this way. If you're maybe selling something with a quicker sales cycle, then doing something else might make more sense. But yeah, it draws on lots of different companies and sort of the best in breed things that they're doing that have helped them be successful. So I'm hoping that people on this call can take those things away and achieve more success themselves as well.
Awesome. They will, I'm sure.
Cool. So why is any of this important? The big thing is that modern companies thrive on predictability and scalability. So in kind of the SaaS world, you need to understand, if I invest more into my sales, it's going to take me some time to get that return because I'm on a subscription model. And so I'm not going to just return that right away, but it's going to happen over time. And so if I'm going to make that investment, it needs to be a predictable investment. And I need to also be able to make a lot of those investments so that I can grow my business over time. Great VPs of sales and sales leaders, CROs, they do well because they can put in a repeatable and a measurable process that scales out to a big sales organization and can reach lots of prospects and lots of customers. But what happens is, as these sales organizations grow, as the company gets bigger, the amount of touch that the VP of sales can have with each of their reps really gets diluted. Once you're at a place where there's 100 people inside of the sales organization, the sales leader can't have one-to-one interactions with all of them. So they need to push a lot of what they know down to the rest of the team and really scale up the skill level of the people that are reporting to them.
I have a question here, actually. So when we talk about owning metrics, I guess my question is, what do we mean by ownership? And what does that look like, say, before scale, when the VP gets to kind of do everything directly, and after scale, when it's more distributed? Yeah,
so that's a great question. So the ownership of the metrics really is, one, like a firm understanding of what the important KPIs are. So what are the things that have to be achieved in order to make progress forward? And so these are things like, obviously everybody knows we have to hit our quota, our bookings target. But what are all of the factors that go into that make us successful? So how many opportunities do we need to open in order to achieve that? What's the average sales price going to be in order to get us to that goal if we close at a normal close rate? What should that close rate be? So these are things that, the business learns over time by selling. And then getting that understanding of which KPIs need to be met in order to hit the overall business goals are what the next level of managers need to understand, because the VP of sales is going to be at this point mostly reporting back to the executive team and taking the business plan and saying, okay, I can achieve these revenue numbers.
Yeah.
They'll work their way back to here's how I'm going to get there, but then they need to be able to put that in front of that next line of sales managers to really know, all the way back down from, okay, that means we need this many ops. That means we need this many demos. That means we need to be making this many phone calls, and they need to convert at this rate, really owning all of that stuff so that people know what do they have to do. And they can also diagnose problems so that if, a particular metric is slipping, they know, why that might be and come up with a plan to fix it.
Sure. So before the ownership is kind of scaled downwards or trickled downwards, I guess, to the individual rep, the reps are just kind of doing what they're told, following the playbook, not doing that analysis and problem solving themselves. Is that basically what it comes down to?
That's the key thing is, prior to kind of getting that ownership of the metrics with the reps, then you'll set a target for them and they'll go out and they'll, do their best to hit that target. But what you really want is people to be able to understand in the times when they maybe don't hit that target, well, why was that? And kind of what are the subcomponents that fed into that we could look to improve, and which of those should we spend our effort on to actually improve that either conversion rate or grow that ASP or, whatever it is, the thing that you're trying to optimize. But you need to be able to kind of get to the root cause of it and then apply pressure on that to fix it.
Right.
So as you're scaling the sales organization, really the VP needs to trust all of the managers and directors that report up to them to kind of own these other parts of the organization, because they're not going to have the ability to scale and work with every single person on the sales team. You also have different segments and teams forming over time inside of companies. So you might put in, you have a commercial, a mid-market, and an enterprise segment, or you might have an inside and an outside team. And so the metrics that correspond with each of those different segments are going to be different, and you need somebody that sort of masters and owns what they are so that they can be constantly improving them. Working with the head of sales as it pertains to rolling all of that up to the business so that we achieve the business goals, but somebody needs to own and continually improve all of that stuff. So what you usually see as a sales organization is scaling up is it starts something like this, where it's kind of a one-to-one relationship. You have the person that's running sales and every salesperson just reports to them. So that's kind of that before state, Colin, that you were describing a minute ago, where, it's not that hard, because the person running sales can set all of the goals and they can meet with all of the salespeople in order to make sure that they understand what they are, that they're hitting them. And the VP of sales is able to sort of diagnose all of the problems that are happening and work on fixing them. But as companies grow, you start seeing things like this, where now all of a sudden I have so many sales reps, I can't meet with every single one of them. So I need to get some sort of a management layer in there. And you might see some of these little sales pods or sales teams starting to form. Then you continue to scale, and all of a sudden you have maybe directors that are running different segments of their own. So you have somebody running the whole inside sales team and somebody running the field team, or your commercial and mid-market and et cetera. And then ultimately, you've got a big hierarchy like this one, where you've got VPs reporting up to a CRO. Those VPs have directors, the directors have managers, and then the reps report to the managers. So the other interesting thing that we usually find inside of companies is that companies don't frequently hire in managers from the outside. Like, they're not hiring somebody that's like, oh, they're a great manager of salespeople, let's put them into that sales manager or sales director position. Generally, what's happening is you're promoting people from within, right? So you're taking your best account executive and you're saying, hey, great job, you're our best account executive. Guess what? Now you're a manager. And so what ends up happening is that person's whole skill set has been to this point revolving around being a great account executive, and they know really well how to close deals, generate pipeline, do all of that stuff, but they don't yet have all the frameworks that they need in order to really effectively manage their team, and maybe don't have a strong competency in kind of owning the metrics from a diagnostic standpoint in order to see trends that are happening and continually improve. And so this is where ultimately what the CRO is trying to do in this case, or the VP of sales or whoever it is mold all of these people into like mini VPs of sales, you know, so they can kind of operate either their pod or their team or their department or their segment the way that the VP of sales would back when the organization was much smaller and everybody was reporting to them.
This always gets a little chuckle out of me because it happened to me. Like I lived this. Not that the sales org I was a part of was scaling, but my career was scaling, right? So I was the good account manager, strategist, and then I was made the manager of account managers and strategists.
Yep.
And I had a couple of them, so I was kind of still able to just use my intuition without any real solid process to help them problem solve around their performance. But then when I leveled up again, I all of a sudden had a team of 12, and intuition wasn't enough anymore. Like I couldn't get my hands around everybody's own individual account bases and trickle down my kind of tribal knowledge around how to problem solve for their performance to each of them individually. And it was a problem for a long time. It messed up my retention. It messed up performance. People just didn't like working for me, frankly, because they didn't feel like they had ownership, and I hadn't given them, I hadn't put processes in place, and we had no tools that I wasn't smart about selecting processes and tools to like pass ownership on to them for their own performance.
Yeah. So you see a lot of companies do two things that are really good. One is, bring in people from the outside that are kind of geared specifically toward training managers, because you see that so commonly. You know, the best salespeople get promoted to sales managers. They just need the training in order to understand how do you effectively kind of manage that team. But the other thing that you can do especially for your new managers, your new directors, et cetera, is put process in place that kind of gives them that foundation that they can operate from. So that's all the stuff that we're going to talk through in a second. But like all of these things, if you take something away from them, think about it like that. If you're running your whole sales organization, is how do I put a process, and you can own the process as the head of sales, but how do I put in the right process that I can teach to everybody so that then I don't have to be there all the time? They can just run this process, and I know that, they're going to be covered from a kind of diagnosing the metric standpoint so that they can continue to improve whatever chunk of the organization they're responsible for.
Yeah, I love it, because now we're going to start talking about processes for performance, and this is going to these are the things that help people hit numbers consistently, right, for scale. But I love it too, because this is like around a principle. It's around the principle of ownership, which can do so much more for you than consistently hitting a number. Like that's how you get consistent execution. That's how you get innovation and execution. When people own how they approach their work, they get to do things like provide feedback upwards a little bit more freely. They get to communicate to the prospect on their terms, and that's where a lot of like improvement can come from if they feel like they own all of that.
Exactly right. Yeah. So we're going to cover 4 different processes that you can put in place in 2019 that'll help you get better ownership out of the whole sales organization on metrics. What they're going to be are daily stand-ups, weekly metrics reviews, monthly leaderboards, and quarterly business reviews. So we'll go through each of them with kind of the why would you use this, who should be using it, how do you use it most effectively lens on it. All right, so our first one is daily stand-ups. What are they? It's basically a quick, short meeting that you want to do with a pretty small team. So probably at like your sales pod level, or like the lowest level where you've got your manager and the reps that report to them. You want to keep these stand-ups short, like 30 minutes or less. And you want to make sure that there's one person there that's like responsible for keeping that meeting on track and keeping it brief, to the point, and actionable. And generally what you want to do is review all of your metrics from the previous day as well as week to date. So what did we accomplish yesterday? Did we achieve all the goals that we set out for yesterday? And how are we doing on the week? Are we achieving our goals for the week? It's nothing complicated. You're not really getting into any of the diagnostic type of metrics. You're more looking at, if you're working with your BDR team, it's like number of calls being made, emails being sent, demos set, ops created, things like that. With AEs, it's pretty similar, where you're looking at the pipeline that they're generating and the meetings that they're setting. It also gives you a great opportunity to get aligned with the team on anything important that's going on throughout the day. So you might also want to pull up the calendar and just review any of the meetings that are on the calendar for that day. And you'll be surprised, like a lot of times you'll find out, oh, we have an important call at 3:00, but there's no sales engineer on it. Or, like I thought I sent out the meeting link on this thing, but I didn't. So in addition to really understanding the metrics and whether you're on pace for the day and for the week, you can also make sure that little things aren't slipping through the cracks. And then the other thing that's really useful to do inside of these meetings is to talk through any kind of interesting conversations that occurred the day before, where it gives people the opportunity to, discuss. I came across an objection on this call that I hadn't heard before. Has anybody else heard that and have a good, way of handling that? Just little things like that, where everybody is learning from each other in these little increments. And so the whole team is making progress forward, but it's also holding everybody accountable to making sure that, they're delivering on the numbers that they're supposed to be putting out. So if you want everybody making 60 calls a day and you're looking at the number of calls everybody is making every single day, it's pretty obvious when people aren't consistently putting in the right efforts to produce the outputs that are needed.
So the daily stand-up, not really meant to be like a deep dive on everything that's going on, just a high level. Here are the big things that are happening today. Here's big things that happened yesterday. It's like a visibility thing. Is that the idea?
Yeah, it's a visibility thing. It's making sure that people are recording their activities and that they're on pace for the week. And then, it's just getting aligned and making sure that everybody is synced up on any important stuff that's going on for the day. And also if there's important learnings that happened in the prior day, you can go through those as well so that everybody benefits from that. But it's really not meant to be a long and involved process. Ideally, you can keep it even under 20 minutes. And it kind of kicks off the day. You want to do it like first thing in the morning so that everybody's kind of got their marching orders and is just ready to go. The benefits of these are that the team gets aligned on everything. You don't see those little things falling through the cracks because you get a little opportunity to check and make sure that you've checked all the boxes on your meetings that are coming up. You get really close attention on the activity metrics. So particularly if you're working with BDR teams or SDR teams, you're like constantly monitoring, are they doing the right volume of outreach? Are they making the right number of calls, sending the right number of emails, and are those converting and translating into meetings and demos? And then the other big benefit is everybody gets to pick up little tips from other reps and sort of learn from each other here. So who should be using these types of meetings? They're great for activity-focused teams. So like I just mentioned, BDR teams, if you're a BDR manager or you have BDRs that report to you, working with them on these stand-ups is great just to make sure that everybody's aligned on the activities. Teams that are in like a real rapid learning mode, maybe that have a new product that's in the market, it's very good to do these because of the communication about what happened yesterday. You're always coming across either new use cases or new objections. So everybody gets that learning happening in real time very quickly as you're having conversations with prospects. And then it's also very good for any sales organization that's broken down into some kind of a pod where there's like a unit that reports to a manager, but that unit is pretty small. So 8 people or fewer. That's good because you really can't run these stand-ups with 20 people. It's just too much. They'll end up taking too much time and they get bogged down into stuff that's not relevant to everybody. You want to make sure that everybody who's in the stand-up will benefit from all the stuff that's being said there. And if there's one person that's in your stand-up that it's like they're, usually the topics aren't as relevant to them, then they probably don't need to come to the stand up. You just want to keep it really focused and mostly people that are working on the same stuff.
So an example of a team this wouldn't be good for would be like AEs with a small portfolio of high value accounts with long sales cycles.
Yeah, that
right.
you would probably not learn as much. Or if you had, like a couple of AEs and then mostly BDRs, then the conversations aren't going to gel as well.
Yeah.
If the AEs are working really closely with the BDRs, then it can be great because you can coordinate on all the handoffs that need to happen. Like, hey, I set up this great meeting yesterday. It's happening at 2:00. You're going to be on it. I made sure that I put the right sales engineer and we're good to go. So just make sure that the topics that people are talking about are going to be relevant to everybody that's there.
And that 8 number, does that come from like being time bound? Like if you want to do it in 20 minutes, it's hard to do it with more than 8 people, or is there some other reason that 8?
Yeah, that's one of the big ones. Like if you're aiming for 20 minutes, if it's fewer than 8 people, then everybody gets at least 3 minutes. Just generally, like if the group is kind of too big, then you end up, like you don't want to have to go into like a big room to do this or anything like that. You should be able to kind of huddle around a computer screen.
Hence the name Stand Up, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Cool.
Yeah. All right, cool. So that's stand-ups. We'll move on to the next one, which is weekly metrics reviews. So weekly metrics reviews, you want to bring in essentially all of your managers from a particular level. So, if you have a team where it's like BDRs and SDRs and they report to sales managers, you would bring in like all of your sales managers and maybe you have kind of junior sales managers as well, but they're all together. And it's not that everybody is presenting every single week, but you do choose either 1 or 2 of those managers who's kind of presenting their team's metrics to the rest of the group each week. So everybody's present. And then you also want somebody that's more senior than all of those people present as well. So if all of those managers report into a director or to a VP, then that director or that VP should be there as well. It's good to keep these consistent from week to week so that everybody is measuring the same KPIs week to week. And you can it's like a consistent agenda that everybody is moving through. And those KPIs should be a mix of past performance as well as leading indicators. So past performance are, diagnostic type metrics like conversion rates of leads or, how efficient it is for this team to produce opportunities out of the number of phone calls they're making, or ASPs, sales cycles, things that can kind of paint the picture as to if we're performing at a certain level, why is that? And then you also want leading indicators in there as well. So that's stuff like pipeline coverage or sales velocity, things that sort of project forward how you're likely to do based off of your historical results, because part of the goal of this meeting is to provide opportunities for teams to course correct. So if you're 1 month into the quarter and you have weak pipeline coverage, that's a great opportunity to sort of get visibility on that and then come up with strategies for how do we generate more pipeline that's going to be able to close in time for us to hit our number for the quarter. Yeah, go ahead, Colin.
So I'm curious about what you think about this, because something we're actually using right now is basically like a deck template, right? And it's the same template every week, and the manager of each team puts their numbers, the piece that they own in the deck. And that's kind of like the force factor, like the collection point, so that everybody has to be ready with their stuff for that weekly discussion.
Right.
Do you think that's good, or is there a way we can improve on that?
No, I think that's good. Like making it clear what piece of it everybody owns is good, so that they can prep on that. The big thing is to make sure that everybody has kind of command of the full set of stuff that they're responsible for.
Yeah.
So like in these meetings, it's good to have, like, you want to paint a picture of how, if you're a sales manager, how your team is doing overall, as well as how each of the individual reps that report to you are doing too, to make sure it's not, if your team's doing great, is that skewed by the fact that one person is crushing it and everybody else is kind of just along for the ride?
Right.
You know, or is it pretty even performance? So you want to be able to compare like your team against the other teams, and then within your team, like this rep against all the other reps, to understand where the opportunities for improvement are.
Right. And then so you've gone out of your way to make sure that you mentioned that there should be like a director or VP level person here too. Is that so they can, is that just for their visibility, or is it so that for the function of the meeting, keeping the meeting on track and on task, or both?
It's partially to keep the meeting on track. The other big thing is that in this meeting, you want all of the other sales managers that aren't presenting to kind of be critiquing the people that are presenting. So you want those people thinking the way that that VP would be thinking, and asking the same types of questions like, oh, I see that your ASP is lower this month than it has been in previous months. Why is that? What do you think is driving that? And so you want the VP there to sort of spur those questions on. And at the beginning of when you first implement this, maybe that person is asking most of the questions so that the other people start picking up on, oh, these are the types of questions that we should be asking.
Right.
You know, and the goal again is like, get all of those sales managers to start thinking and behaving like mini VPs of sales, because eventually if your org keeps scaling the way that we were showing at the beginning, they actually will be.
I love that point. So it's not, because I can see, you know, VPs are busy people, right? I could see them saying, you know, I don't have time for this weekly meeting. I'm not getting that much out of it. I'll just look at the deck after, or, you know, I'll look at the sheet.
Right.
So they're there to, like, it becomes a little contest. So it's less back padding and more like, oh, I want to look good in front of the VP. Better ask a tough question. Better start a good discussion.
Yeah, to some extent, yeah, a lot of people are learning from that person. And then also, you know, this meeting can be like an hour. And so that's 1 hour that the VP of sales is spending kind of digging into these metrics. Yeah. Whereas the other way that companies can do this is you have each of the teams like spend that hour with the VP of sales every single week. And so now if you have 10 teams, that's 10 hours that you have to spend, as opposed to one focused hour where you're imparting your knowledge on people instead of, you know, just having that like one-to-one dialogue where maybe not as much is being picked up by the rest of the team.
I got it. So this is meant to also replace those meetings that otherwise would have happened where it's like VP direct report. This can, like a team leader to a VP. This can be a combo of that to help them hold each other accountable.
It can be a combo of that. You still want to do those one-on-one meetings as well, but you know, this kind of gets the learnings from those spread across your whole sales management function, as opposed to just directing it at one person at a time.
Right, and then it stays kind of in the room where
So
cool.
And that's one of the big benefits is that learning gets spread. So all of these reps that are in the room but not presenting, they start thinking the way that the VP of sales does. And they can also bring that kind of thought process with them when they are meeting with their direct reports. So, you know, they're starting to think really diagnostically about stuff now when a sales manager is meeting with their team of AEs and BDRs. They've got that diagnostic mindset in place, ready to go. They've maybe keyed in on some smart things that either other people said or that the VP of sales said or that they came up with on their own by being in those meetings, and they can really start digging in other places as well. The other big benefit of these meetings is that the people presenting have to really know their metrics and really be solid on it, because they're, you know, showing them to the entire rest of the management organization as well as their boss. So you need to understand what's going on, and you need to have good ways of sort of digging in and coming up with solutions when there are problems, because every team's metrics aren't going to be stellar every single week. It's just never going to be the case. And so you got to be able to start thinking, okay, I see that we do have a problem in this particular area. How do we solve that problem? Because like problems are natural and it's totally fine, but if you can't come up with solutions to them, that's when you really run into trouble. So it gets people into that problem solving mindset. And then it also, like, having these meetings shows the team that all of these KPIs are important. that's why having a consistent agenda and consistent metrics that people are reviewing each time is good, because it lets the VP of sales put in place the process as to, these are the important KPIs that you should be focused on. Now, like, take these and run with them, diagnose your business, and present it to the rest of the team, and talk about the strategies that you're putting into place and the solutions that you're coming up with in order to continually improve. The other benefit of doing these and including leading indicators is it gives people multiple opportunities throughout the quarter to take stock and figure out where the effort should be spent for the remainder of the quarter. So if your pipeline is in great shape, for example, let's keep the focus on working with our pipeline to close those deals. But, if you just don't have enough pipeline in there, let's make sure that we're doing enough prospecting and opening enough new opportunities in order to get our pipeline to a place where we would actually have enough to hit our goals for the quarter. The types of teams that these weekly metrics reviews are good for are teams that know they're going to be doing like another level of scaling up. And so they're really trying to build leadership talent within an existing sort of tranche of managers. So if you know that right now it's sort of a VP of sales, bunch of managers, bunch of reps type structure, but next year we're going to need a couple of directors that manage some managers, and then the managers are managing the reps. This is a great way to build the skills that those eventual directors will need, because eventually the directors are going to be responsible for kind of diagnosing an entire patch of the business, maybe an entire segment, or maybe your entire inside function or something along those lines. So if you put this in place early enough, then really the goal is the head of sales is grooming that next set of sort of senior level managers within the sales organization so that they're set up for success once you make that next leap. It's also good for teams that have complex sales motions and sales processes, just because those types of companies tend to have more things that they need to diagnose. There's like more factors. And so getting everybody together and saying, sometimes the person presenting is saying, hey, I'm having a problem with like my win rate or something along those lines. It's clear my win rate is going down. Does anybody else have maybe solutions for that, has come across this before and can kind of proactively seek help? So when the sales process is complicated like that, it's good to have like multiple voices around the table that can pitch in and give good solutions and ideas. And this is also a great process to put in place if you have a really collaborative team, a team that likes helping each other out, because that's a lot of what you're doing inside of this meeting. Is one person maybe is struggling to figure out how to improve in a certain area. Everybody else gets an opportunity to actually help that person, make recommendations, describe things that have worked for them in the past, so that everybody collectively gets better.
So we just got a really good question on that topic from Chris Ortolano. Thanks for the question, Chris. Let us know where you're from, by the way. So Chris's question is, what are some common barriers to creating the collaborative sales environment in the first place? So, this weekly metric review, good for a collaborative sales environment. If you don't already have that environment, I guess Chris's question is like, if we try to use this meeting, it won't work. Is that the question? And how can we work around that? And he's from Portland, Oregon.
Yeah, so it's a good question. If you don't have a collaborative environment, you got to think a little bit about why that is. Having a competitive environment between the different sales managers is good to some extent, but if it's sort of overdone, then it can be detrimental. So one thing that it could be is all of your sales managers maybe are like competing for the same deals ultimately. So It could be a function of like drawing up your territories better, actually, so that it's clear, if I help this person out, it's not going to hurt me anyway, because they can only sell in this particular territory. So it's not going to impact my business. But a different thing is a lot of companies, it's beneficial to put in some sort of goal and incentive that applies to everybody that pertains to a business level outcome. or like an entire sales org level outcome. So, if the sales team hits X% of the overall quota, everybody is compensated on that. And so once you have things like that in place, people think about things a little bit differently, and they're much more willing to help everybody out because it's, the rising tide lifts all the boats. And so they're much more willing to give good suggestions to other folks. But it does take some thought and some work in order to get the structure in place to have that collaborative environment.
One of the things that I ran into when I was managing my account management team, which was a kind of sales, was that I would use my team meetings to talk about, new initiatives that I wanted to roll out. And then I would use my one-to-ones to talk about how each person was doing that separately.
Yep.
And people weren't very collaborative. And finally, one of my reps did something that was really interesting. They had a new way of going about generating some demand for a new service offering and providing a good level of consultative service on the side. And I asked them to present it in a team meeting. And then I made them the go-to, because I didn't know how to do it. I had to make them the go-to person for all of that. So I think there's some level of you just have to delegate ownership for interesting things or even necessary functions sometimes out to reps. That it's a good career expansion thing for them if they want to go into management or just learn something new, but it also forces people to talk to each other about their deals.
Exactly right. Yeah. And collaborate on them. Yeah. Yep. They just have to kind of get into the habit of doing it.
Yep.
Cool. All right. So our next one is monthly leaderboards. It's a leaderboard, obviously. It's sent out to the whole company or to the whole sales organization that is stack ranking the team. So it's calling out, here's your top reps for these metrics, and also here's the bottom reps for these metrics. So it's like a little bit of an extreme form of ownership because everybody sees it, and it's really clear who's doing what. You want this to be in a very simple format, so nothing complicated at all, just kind of like a list of, here's the metric, here's the top people, here's how they're doing on that. Same thing, here's the metric, here's the bottom people, here's their numbers on that. And you also want to give everybody access to it, ideally, throughout the course of the month. So it gets sent out maybe as an email at the end of the month, but people can go in and take a look and see how they're doing, and potentially course correct if they find themselves on the wrong half of the list. They have a chance to improve midway through, because they always have access to it.
Yeah, I love this too. This is just such a good, I think people are afraid to show it sometimes. But ultimately, the people on the bottom actually appreciate it because they might not know they're there. And it's worse to be there and not know, right? Because then you can't do anything about it.
Exactly right. Yeah. And you have a chance to, if you're on the bottom half one month, you have a chance to show up on the top half in the next month.
Right. If you can show how you've improved. Yeah. Yeah.
So obviously these create great accountability because there's really no hiding when you're sending out the whole list of people and stack ranked on both top and bottom. It's also good because it fosters competition between people. So, you can put spiffs on, all right, if you're in the top 3 on a particular metric, there's some sort of a spiff on that. So you can sort of choose as the sales leader from month to month, what's the most important thing that I want people focusing on and really dial them in on that by compensating them on being on the top of that list. The other thing that it does though is it makes sure that people are knowing whether they're on track for their quarter because they're getting this. They can see it throughout the month. They can also see it really stack ranked at the end of each of the 2 months at the beginning of the quarter. So if it's pipeline, that's the metric that you're looking at, and you're showing up middle to bottom of the list. It gives you a great opportunity to really hone in on that and figure out, all right, this is the place where I'm weak this quarter. I know I need to improve because if I don't do that, then I'm not going to be in a position to hit my targets here.
Right. So we just got a good question from Eric Coe, and you might actually come to this, but because you talked about a daily, weekly, monthly, and we're about to talk about quarterly, and we're talking about a lot of meetings here. So Eric Coe is asking the question. It's a big question. So tell us if you're just going to come back to it. the question is, how do you create a balance between too many meetings and not enough meetings?
Yeah. So it's a good question, Eric. I'm wondering if that's Eric Howe, Haugh.
Ko.
Oh, Ko.
At least here he is.
I know somebody named Eric Howe.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't recommend that you put all of these meetings in place for all of your teams, because you will kind of have like this overwhelming number of meetings. I'll talk about this a little bit more at the end, but basically you want to sort of understand what's the right subset of these for your organization that'll make the most impact and kind of focus the team on the stuff that you want them looking at the most, and also have them make the progress that you want to make. Like we just talked about on the weekly sales presentations. That's great if you know that you need to groom that next level of either director level talent or something along those lines. If you're not trying to develop that level of talent and your team is still in that relatively small state where, it's just like managers and reps, and you're not going to bump to that next level of scale for a while, then I would, like skip that one. And then that way people have more time to be doing selling activities and they don't have to be bogged down in meetings all the time. But also part of the goal of these meetings is to come up with a process where you can go through these things like once per period, whether it's week or month or something like that. As opposed to having to like check on stuff all the time randomly because you're like panicked about it because all of a sudden you realized it's a problem. So if the process is in place and people know how to follow it efficiently, it can actually end up saving you time. But also, you don't have to put all of these things into place at once. But it's a good question. Yeah,
that makes sense. I think, it's a balancing act that people are constantly probably adjusting. But so here's another question that's a follow-on on that. The goal here is to try to get reps to own their metrics. So let's say I have a team of BDRs and I start using, I have like 3 teams of BDRs, right? And I start using the daily stand-ups on each of the teams and weekly meetings with me, with the team leaders. How long do I give it before I decide whether or not this has helped my reps own their metrics?
Yeah, that's another really good question. You kind of have to give it like a full cycle, like something roughly equivalent to your sales cycle maybe is good. Because, and I'll talk about this in kind of the conclusions, but these things can fail if you try it like once, twice, maybe 3 times and then abandon it. Like it's sure to fail. A lot of them do take multiple iterations in order to just kind of get them off the ground and get people using them right. And like kind of ironing out the kinks. Like if you put in stand-ups, it might be the case that like your first one lasts like an hour, which is way too long. And then you realize, oh, you know what? We didn't have to like cover that stuff or that stuff. We can just keep it focused on these things. So I'd give it some time, but particularly give it like a sales cycle at least in order to really see the full spectrum of all of the different metrics that you would want to measure in your sales process so that you can look at a good mix of activity metrics, pipeline generation, how you're moving those deals through the pipeline, et cetera. And then that way you can make the determination, like, is this helping us or is it just wasting our time?
Yeah, makes sense to give it a full sales cycle. That makes a lot of sense. Thanks to the community, by the way. Great questions, everybody. Keep them coming.
Keep them coming. So the monthly leaderboards are good for when you can really compare person to person. So if you have a big team, but everybody is roughly responsible for similar metrics, and it could just be like you have a big BDR team or AE function or something like that. But obviously you want to be able to compare people apples to apples if you're stack ranking them on their metrics. And then you also want to like wait until your metrics and your benchmarks are fairly well established before you put out something like this. Because if you're still deciding on which KPIs are right for your organization, it's really not fair to the team to stack rank everybody on something that might actually be meaningful. And you'll actually cause more harm than good because people will be all up in arms focused on, well, I have to hit this number so I'm not on the bottom of the leaderboard. But in reality, that's actually an unimportant number and it's a waste of time for them to be focused on that. And it's also good for teams that are decentralized because it gets that like competitive spirit going inside of people, even if they're not necessarily all inside of the same building or the same room or something like that. Sorry, skipped a couple. All right, so our next and last one is quarterly business reviews, QBRs. So in your QBRs, the big focus here is on your top level managers and directors. Usually you want to do these once your organization has become pretty big, so you have some directors that are reporting to the VPs or to the CRO.
What's pretty big, like a couple hundred people?
Not necessarily a couple hundred, but definitely like over 50 people in the sales organization, or, you know, over 75 people is like a decent threshold. Big enough so that you've created some different segments inside of the org. So
right.
You've at least got like an inside and an outside, or you've got a mid-market and an enterprise or something like that.
Sure. Makes sense.
And in these meetings, you're looking at sort of the bigger trends. So what's your ASP moving like? What's your win rate moving like? What's your efficiency numbers doing? What's your customer acquisition cost? Kind of the more business level questions. And you're getting strategic in these meetings, and you're trying to not necessarily say, here's the thing I want to focus on in the next quarter, but instead, like, are there strategic shifts that we should be making in the quarter ahead? So for example, should we be targeting different types of companies? Should we be leading with, you know, a different product offering instead of selling, you know, some other product? Is there a
big
positioning
questions?
Big meaty questions. Yeah. You want to get other departments involved here too. So you bring in the marketing team, you bring in, you know, customer success, depending on whether that's a relevant function. Product marketing can be huge here, because product marketing often is, you know, kind of feeding all of the positioning and strategy back to the sales team. Sales enablement, if that's a function inside of your organization, should definitely be present. And so there's a lot of cross-department collaboration that can happen here, but in terms of tying it back to how people understand the metrics, this is where those diagnostic metrics can be the things that feed you, okay, we should be like focusing in on this because, you know, our ASP is going down or something like that. So a good example is, you know, a lot of times inside of companies, it gets, continues to get harder to grow as the company gets bigger. Like your win rates are declining and maybe your ASP is going down. And that's because you're starting to reach some saturation points inside of the market. Yep. Questions that you could ask at that point is like, should we just raise the price of our product? Should we kill a version of our product? Maybe you have like base, enterprise, ultimate, and a lot of people are settling on enterprise because it's pretty much the same as ultimate, but cheaper. Well, maybe you should just get rid of that. Like, those are the types of questions that looking at trends on your win rates, on your ASPs, on your efficiency can lead you to, because you're looking at what's happening to the business overall over time, or different segments of the business over time.
Right. So the quarterly business review is like a chance. Everybody get off the treadmill for a second. Let's examine the treadmill. Does it still work? Like, why? Let's make sure we're all still walking on it for a reason, right?
Yeah, exactly. You really want to be taking a step back and taking a longer term perspective on things, and talking about stuff that could really move the needle, not just like small tweaks that, you know, that we could make that'll maybe increase the number of conversations that we're having or something. So this really gives your directors and your managers a chance to, like you just said, step off that kind of daily march forward and think strategically about the business. They can kind of recalibrate. You can make needle moving changes. You can get other departments involved. You can, I mean, a lot of times you see like the finger pointing going on between marketing and sales, but hopefully instead of that, it's more of a collaboration that's happening where, you know, sales can say like, these particular types of, you know, leads and prospects are great. What can we do to drive more of those? Or, you know, it seems like we're getting traction with this new product, but, you know, could we have some sort of battle card that explains the features of it better, or stuff like that? when you have the other departments there, they can get some context when sales is like asking for stuff. They can get some context as to, well, why is that? What's it going to help with? And then they can prioritize their activities as well, because they have a lot of different things that they could do, but they can hone in on the ones that they think can make the biggest impact,
right.
you know, and grow things for the business overall.
Yeah, cool.
And these are great, like we mentioned earlier, for teams that have lots of different hierarchy levels. So you want kind of, it's like you've got your person leading sales, and then you have that next level of person below them, might be VPs, might be directors. They're the ones that are responsible for pulling together everything about their segment of the business, but they can also get you know, their managers and all of their direct reports involved in that preparation and the feedback, you know, so that everybody is kind of owning this process and everybody has some input that ultimately goes into the QBR. It's great for companies that are growing really quickly and or are in competitive industries, because in both of those situations, you're like facing new strategic challenges all the time. And so these recalibration points are very important.
Yeah.
And then same thing with companies that have either lots of products, complex sales strategies. Again, like you need to step back and recalibrate and make sure that ultimately what you're doing makes the most sense. And, you know, if not, like it gives you an opportunity to course correct 4 times throughout the year.
Right. All right. So we've got daily stand-ups, weekly, what'd you call the weekly ones? Greg?
Weekly metrics reviews, the monthly leaderboard, and quarterly business review. So as frequency decreases, complexity, the size of the question increases. Fair to say? Yeah, generally. Yeah. And kind of the strategic nature of the meeting is heightened. You're asking those bigger, meatier questions.
Right. Cool. So we've got a couple minutes left. I know you've got some conclusions. I also want to make sure that people have any last questions you want to squeeze in. Feel free to pop them in. If anything really good comes up, we'll get it in there, guys.
Cool. Yeah, so some of this we've covered, but in terms of conclusions, the first thing to do is really assess where you're at as a business and where you're going to be in a year. And based on that, you can think about, well, what are the skills that I want my managers to pick up with respect to owning their metrics, and what are the processes that I know I need to put in place to kind of support them. So think about that. Think about what you're trying to get out of it. You want to communicate why you're doing any of this stuff back to the team. Otherwise, they're going to be like, why am I showing up to this meeting? I could be, you know, selling to people and hitting my targets instead of talking about them. So
right.
Really explain those benefits and how it's going to help them in their career. And then, like I said before, stick to it. It might not work out great the first couple of meetings that you have. You got to just know that and think about that as you're having the meetings, and think about, how do we do this meeting better the next time?
All right. Awesome. Greg, amazing insights. Such a clear system. I love how specific and actionable all of your steps are. And the coolest thing is that, like I said at the beginning, this isn't just some crap you came up with off the top of your head. Like, this is the stuff that Greg has seen work time and time again, everybody, not just in his own experience scaling sales orgs to 10x in crazy time frames, but also working with all the amazing companies he works with at his company, Reckoner. If you have a chance, check them out. They have a cool tool that helps with a lot of this stuff. So if you're looking to get your reps to own their metrics, Reckoner is a good place to start. Thanks again for joining, everybody. Thanks again for the participation. It's been a lot of fun. We'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Colin. This was great.